by the final days of 1944.
As the winter
air
deepened,
war
the strategic
over
bombing
Europe
campaigns
had
crippled the
entered its
industrial
most
zone, leaving the retreating
unforgiving
armies
phase.
stranded.
Germany's ground forces were collapsing on multiple fronts, but the Reich still fought desperately for survival. Fuel more than territory, more than cities had become the lifeblood of its war machine. Oil refineries and port facilities were now the primary targets, and few cities mattered more than Hamburg. For the American bomber crews, these missions were brutally simple in concept and merciless in execution. Fly deep into enemy territory, maintain formation at all costs, drop the bombs precisely, then turn for home if home was still possible. On December 31st, Glenn Rojohn climbed into the left seat of his B-17, the little skipper, knowing this was no routine sortie. The winter air was dense, making the aircraft sluggish and heavy. Every man aboard understood what that meant. Longer exposure over the target, thicker flak, and fewer margins for error. As the formation crossed the German coast, first black bursts appeared below them. Anti-aircraft fire rose in carefully calculated patterns, filling the sky with steel fragments designed not to destroy a single aircraft, but to shred everything flying through that altitude. The bombers pressed on, engines synchronized, wings nearly overlapping. Discipline was survival. Ahead of Rojohn's group, formation began to thin. One B-17 lurched violently, then fell away trailing smoke. Another simply vanished in a flash of flame. The crews watched in silence. There was no time to mourn. Every second spent looking away increased the odds of becoming the next casualty. As the target area came into view, smoke markers blossomed over the docks. This was the signal. Bomb bay doors opened across the formation, exposing the aircraft's most vulnerable moment. The flak intensified instantly, pounding upward with a ferocity few of the pilots had ever witnessed. Then disaster struck the lead squadron. A B-17, known as Fool's Rush In, took a direct hit. The blast tore through its structure, knocking it violently off course. Out of control, it veered straight into another bomber, Cramp's Traps. The collision was catastrophic. Metal crumpled, wings sheared away. Both aircraft broke apart and fell from the sky. Inside the little skipper, Rojohn and his co-pilot, William Leek, stared in disbelief. Instead, 6 parachutes blossomed below them, 3 men from each aircraft, expelled by the force of the collision and somehow still alive. There was no time to process the miracle. Rojohn keyed the radio and ordered the bombing run completed. Seconds later, hundreds of 500-pound bombs streamed from the aircraft, tumbling earthward toward the industrial heart of Hamburg. The mission, at least, would be fulfilled.
Defying all logic, the crippled bomber flew on,
that this was only the
pilotless,
beginning
yet resolute,
of the worst
through the
moments
turbulent
of the flight
skies of
were
the
still
European
ahead,
theater.
waiting beyond the turn for home. The formation barely had time to tighten up before the next danger arrived. As the bombers completed their turn and headed back toward the North Sea, warning calls crackled through the intercom. Shapes appeared in the distance, growing rapidly larger. These were not the lumbering fighters the crews had learned to anticipate. They were something else entirely faster, slaker, and terrifyingly unfamiliar. Jet-powered interceptors screamed down from above. The first pass was over almost before the gunners could react. Cannon fire ripped through the air, punching holes through the formation before vanishing below in a wide, graceful arc. The aircraft was already gone by the time tracers converged on empty sky. The men inside the bombers stared in stunned disbelief. This was the future of aerial warfare, and it had arrived without warning. Moments later, propeller-driven fighters followed.
The words filled the aircraft, echoing through headsets and bare metal. No one interrupted him. No one could help him. One by one, crew members removed their helmets, allowing him his final moments in solitude. Outside, fire spread unchecked. Ammunition began to cook off, sending bullets spraying into the air at random. The combined weight of the 2 aircraft dragged them downward. Control was slipping away. Rojohn understood the truth with terrible clarity. The sea meant death. Land meant a chance, however small. He would have to fly what no one had ever trained for. 2 bombers, burning, broken, and bound together long enough to save whoever still could be saved. What happened in the sky that afternoon was not merely an accident. It was the consequence of a system pushed to its limits. By late 1944, American strategic bombing had reached an unprecedented scale. Thousands of aircraft crossed hostile airspace daily, relying on discipline, formation flying, and sheer endurance. The mission over Hamburg reflected both the strength and the vulnerability of that doctrine. When formations held, bombers survived. When they fractured, the cost was immediate and unforgiving. The appearance of jet-powered German fighters during the withdrawal phase revealed another truth. Technology was advancing faster than tactics. Crews trained to fight propeller-driven interceptors suddenly faced enemies they could barely track, let alone defeat. Speed alone reshaped the battlefield, foreshadowing a new era of air combat that no one aboard those bombers had prepared for. Yet the most striking lesson of the flight did not come from technology or strategy. It came from human judgment. Faced with an impossible situation, two burning aircraft locked together. Glenn Rojohn and William Leek chose land over sea, not because it offered safety, but because it offered possibility. That decision, made in seconds under extreme stress, saved lives. It was not written in manuals. It was not taught in training. It was instinct, responsibility, and moral clarity under pressure. From the German side, a rare and sobering moment followed. On the ground, coastal gunners watched the 8-engine wreck stagger toward land. One officer recognized the reality instantly. These men were already lost. There was no tactical value in finishing them off. Fire ceased not out of mercy alone, but out of recognition that war had already taken everything it could from them. This moment cuts through the simplified narratives of victory and defeat. It shows that even in total war, humanity sometimes asserts itself in quiet, unrecorded ways. For the United States, the lesson was enduring. Air power could devastate industry and infrastructure, but it could not erase the human cost borne by those sent to execute it. Survival often depended less on grand strategy than on the decisions of individuals. Men who chose duty, restraint, or sacrifice when no good options remained. These were not heroes in the ceremonial sense. They were professionals confronting the limits of war and discovering, painfully, where those limits lay. The impact came with a violence no training could prepare them for. One aircraft disintegrated instantly. The other was hurled upward, then slammed back into the ground, torn open by fire and steel. When the noise finally faded, there was only silence, broken by the realization that two men were still alive inside the wreckage. Glenn Rojohn and William Leek had survived. They emerged battered, burned and stunned, standing amid twisted metal that only minutes earlier had been two flying fortresses. Around them lay the final evidence of a mission that had demanded everything it could from the men who flew it, and more from those who did not return. Some crew members lived because others did not. Some prayers were answered, others were not. In the years that followed, the flight would be remembered not for the bombs dropped over Hamburg, nor for the enemy aircraft destroyed or driven away. It endured because it revealed something quieter and far more enduring, the limits of war and the weight carried by those forced to operate within them. Rojohn received the Distinguished Flying Cross, an honor he rarely spoke about. When pressed, he deflected the praise. Survival, he insisted, was not the result of heroism, but of partnership. Without his co-pilot, he would not have lived. Without trust, discipline, and shared resolve, no medal could explain what happened in those final minutes. This is where history often misleads us. We search for victories, for triumphs, for clean conclusions. But many of the most important lessons of war are written in survival, not success. They are written in restraint, in decisions made when no good choices remain. The aircraft are gone, the airfields are silent, the men themselves have passed into history. Yet the question remains, when faced with impossible circumstances, when systems fail, when plans collapse, when lives depend on seconds, what truly matters? If this story left you reflecting on the human cost behind strategy and technology, share your thoughts below. What lesson stands out to you most? And if you value preserving these stories not as spectacle, but as reminders, consider joining us as we continue to explore the moments that shaped history, one decision at a time. The battle ended long ago, but its meaning is still being understood.